Okay, welcome, Nadim.
Thank you.
It's good to have you. Yeah, it's good to have you here today. Yeah, I'm really excited to have you on because I've had a couple different perspectives from students and people who are currently doing Northeastern Align and discovering Silicon Valley, or some of them lived here their whole lives. I'm really interested in having another perspective because, I think a lot of people watching this might be either prospective students or people who are wondering what it's like to do computational or CS type stuff in Silicon Valley, and what sort of stuff is out there for them. So I'm really interested to tell your story today, and I'm curious because I haven't heard all the pieces myself. So I guess my first question is just, could you tell us a little bit about you, your background, where you're from, and what made you take this path that you've decided to take?
Yeah. So, okay, maybe to start, so my undergrad was in applied math, and I always essentially kind of enjoyed kind of anything that was more on the math side, and then that's when I started getting into more computational kind of also components, and I was also really enjoying that part of it. I did my PhD in computational math. That's where I started kind of exploring both of those kind of fields coming in together, and I really kind of liked how a lot of the kind of the concepts that I would have in math, I would actually be able to test them, see whether they're true, they're not, using computational tools. And that really kind of gave me more I would say developed my passion for those kind of this intersection of math and computational science, which essentially led me to more studying more computer science. And I really kind of also enjoyed kind of also just learning how to code more. I would say I did that since undergrad, but it's also kind of with new fields with machine learning, understanding how a lot of the math concepts were really kind of also used to develop this field essentially. And I always also loved teaching, which essentially got me here. So it's I always kind of love teaching, kind of helping people essentially be able to develop those skills. And that's something I like about the online program, which I'll talk about later. Yeah, but essentially that's what got me to Northeastern. So I just finished my first year as a teaching faculty here. And yeah, so that's maybe a quick background about myself and how I got here.
Awesome, yeah. Well, we love having you too. I mean, I took a artificial intelligence class with you, and I had a really good time. Also audited another one of your more mathy classes on linear algebra and things like that. So we've seen each other a bit, and I appreciate your teaching style. Of course, every student has a preferred style maybe, so they may have a preference for your type of teaching or even for other types as well. But I feel that I really was inspired by some of the teaching you did, and
thank you.
It's interesting to hear a little bit more about just your path from starting in math and moving into some of the computational stuff. Do you it's kind of a silly question, but do you feel that maybe some of the finding computation was almost like a compression of that math stuff, in the sense that you learned how to do all this sort of step-by-step stuff, and the computational side of it just sort of merges it into a single step or a couple steps? Do you feel that that was the case? Maybe it's a little bit of a technical question for some people listening, but just from my end, I've seen in NLP at least sometimes you can go through all these steps of taking the derivative and doing all this stuff, and then you do you put it into a library in Python, and it's 2 steps. And you're I just did 100 steps, and then the computation, you're oh, well, now that's kind of cool. Now I want to know what the steps are for the computer.
Oh, well, yeah. No, I feel that's something I also often tell in the CS 5001. So that's the intro to programming essentially class here, the kind of the foundation of computer science. Something I love also about computer science is that it kind of allows you to be lazy in a way. So kind of what you were talking about the packages and stuff. So it's once you develop essentially a package that is modeling some kind of, let's say, mathematical kind of concept or something, it's I don't actually have to go through this again. And another thing is that the computer is reliable. So it's it's not going to do calculation mistakes, it's not going to do some derivation mistakes. It's once it's coded properly, I can trust it the whole time. Whilst with me, I can very easily do calculation mistakes. I can very easily do some mistakes, kind of copying something, which could lead to something wrong. That's something that I also loved about it. I'm okay, I can actually rely on you. You're going to get me the right thing.
For sure.
Yeah, and I wanted to essentially kind of it's it would always be an amazing tool for me to also check whether what I was doing makes sense, does it not make sense, whether I could expect those results, I could not expect those results. Yeah, so I thought coding, kind of anything computational was a really great tool.
Yeah, and I guess it's complementary, sort of like you're saying.
100%.
So yeah, it's really cool. You know, I sort of approach things almost from the opposite side of you in a way because I started with more of a little bit of a coding background and just sort of like playing around with the computer and moved into sort of the math stuff and was happy to discover it with you. Although sometimes these new symbols and things can be a little scary when you first see them, but it's exciting as well to have a new challenge and to try and figure this stuff out like a puzzle.
Yeah.
So, what sort of I'm curious also. What do you think is your number one go-to for really inspiring students? Like, do you have a specific technique? I know you have many students who come in and they're thirsty for knowledge, or maybe some of them are kind of don't know yet what they want to do. What do you do to really inspire people and really get them sort of maybe spark their interest in a new topic? Is there a specific technique or several techniques?
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure if it's like one technique per se that I'm always applying because it does depend also on the student that I'm working with. Something that I would say always, like, I try to talk about what actually I'm passionate about very clearly. So it's like I wanted to kind of be an environment in which everyone can talk about what they're passionate about very freely. And so if I kind of start by doing it on purpose. It's like, okay, kind of embrace the nerdiness in a way. So that in case students also like kind of are enjoying some interesting topic, they can also talk about it freely and like actually be excited about it. And then another thing that I also try to like apply with my teaching so that students can actually be more open is that try to, I think, be more understanding. It's like, let's say they're struggling with something, but they're actually interested in it. I'm like, oh yeah, I also struggled. Like when I first started learning coding, I was always fighting with my laptop the whole time. It's like, it doesn't get what I wanted. I'm like, it's like not understanding me. I'm like, most probably coding something wrong. But it was like, oh yeah, I definitely understood the challenges. And I often try to also share those stories with students. Because I don't want them to think it's like, oh yeah, no, like he knows how to code, everything works perfectly. I'm like, no, I definitely went through the struggles. I definitely went through like a lot of nights of debugging. I had once, I remember like during my PhD, like some bug that took me, I think, a couple of weeks to a month. Like for me to actually find it.
A month? Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And was it something in the end that was like, oh, how did I not see that?
Like an indexing error or something. I'm like, really? Like, come on. And every time it's like I would get a car crash out of nowhere, like I remember because I did traffic modeling in my PhD.
Okay.
And then I would get a car crash out of nowhere. I'm like, why is this happening? Come on. And then tracing it back, you would find something kind of like a small error like this.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's like I feel like that often I've noticed helps students as well because they notice it's like, oh, okay, I can actually relate to him. It's like he also went through those challenges. It's like, okay, it's like maybe it's fine that I'm going through challenges. I can maybe make it like after a while.
Yeah, I guess that's sort of like the almost an empathy type thing of like, I've been through that as well where I was experiencing a challenge with something and someone really helped me, and even you helped me at times as well, as whether it's a teacher or somebody who's another student, and then in the same way someone else is struggling and you're sort of like, that didn't trip me up, but like I know exactly what you're going through in the sense that some other thing like was really opaque to me.
Oh, 100%.
And so it helps you get in the mode of like, well, I never had to explain it, but now that I did explain it, I sort of get it more myself too.
Oh, 100. I feel like with teaching, it's like you understand a lot of the concepts much better after teaching it. Honestly, even even if like let's say I knew a concept before, I understood it like after studying it. When teaching it, having to explain it very clearly, everything step by step, it's like, oh wait, I'm also having some oh moments. It's like that makes a lot more sense also to me. And that's also what I love about teaching, because you're learning the whole time as well, while teaching essentially. Which, yeah, I would say is one of my favorite parts also about teaching.
That's a good part, a good way of looking at things. I remember also my previous background was in language. I often talk about that with people, and it's sort of like, you learned a foreign language and stuff. I feel in the same way of what you're describing. Sometimes people will say, and students now, friends of mine now will say, oh, why do you say it this way in English? And I'm like, I have no idea why you say it that way. It's just the way you say it, okay? Yeah. But then you have to look it up and say, okay, oh, this is why, because it's, phrasal verb, and this is the reason why, and that's why. But it's a humbling experience to actually say, this is my native language. I obviously know how to speak, but when you really want to explain it, like, you get a deeper understanding, and that learning experience that you're talking about really comes into play.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, I love the example with language, especially. It's like, yeah, because often it's like something a lot of people say with classes, like in algorithms, another thing, it's like, oh, it's a trick and you have to see it or something. I'm like, I don't agree with this. It's like often people say it's a trick, or it's like, oh, it's something, it's like, oh, you have to come up with it. I'm like, not really. Sometimes you just have to like think about different approaches, which one makes more sense, which one does not make sense, and try different things. And then after some practice, it's like you start realizing it's like, okay, wait, this is actually working. It's like, oh, I thought of it, this was similar to something like that.
Yeah.
And it started making more sense.
Sure, it's a new way of seeing things. But I think also in class and in your class as well, I think that more so than just I know how to write a program in Python, it's sort of like I know a new way of thinking and seeing a problem that I've acquired over a whole semester. And that's sort of the intuition behind that can be just as valuable as just knowing how to write some specific loop in Python to do something. And that's something that I really enjoyed about my education here.
Yeah, so. That's amazing. Yeah, because for me, it's like I always like focusing on the concept rather than it's like because and like actually how to derive it. Why did we even do it? It's like okay, going more step by step. Because these were the questions that I would have sometimes as a student. I'm like, why am I doing this? Why do I care about this? And it's like, oh, that makes sense. It's like it can help me in this way. I can apply it for this thing that like maybe I'm interested in. And it's like okay, oh, I see. Like I always wanted to kind of understand more of like what happened before. So that's why like usually when I'm using like a package like coding wise, it's like I don't like using it blindly. I want to understand what's actually happening behind the picture, how it was developed, why it was developed.
For sure. Yeah. And I guess that also, from a scientific perspective, is interesting too because you need to know what came before you in order to move things forward. Maybe if you have some idea of how the package works, you might have some idea of how to improve it. Maybe one day you or another one of our students might be contributing to one of those packages. And the more you know about sort of how it works under the hood, the more you'll be likely to say, hey, I have an idea, why are we doing it this way? Maybe 100%. We can improve this, we can make this faster.
100%.
That can be a big move forward for the industry.
100%. And you kind of understand more the limitations of what's actually happening rather than like trusting it blindly.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
It's sort of a fun mix between that too, because I feel in my research and my experience, I've been a little bit exposed to more of the, figure out the big picture first and then get into the nitty gritty. And there's sort of two approaches, right? It's like we always talk about bottom up and top down in computer science, whether that's for dynamic programming or software engineering. There's sort of the top down is like, let me see the big picture of things and then I'll dive in once I see something I like or that I need to know more about. And the bottom up is, well, let me start by learning all these little tiny building blocks. And then after I understand each nitty gritty thing, I can combine all of them into some working knowledge of a topic. And it's almost a debate sometimes where people think one is more useful than the other, but a good combination of that is sort of a nice way to go too.
100%. I feel like it's like also different learning styles. Some people might prefer one thing, other people might prefer another thing. And they're both definitely like great ways of doing it. It's like some people want to like kind of understand, okay, what's the big picture first, and then like really go into the small details before, and like, okay, I can actually understand what I'm actually doing. Often, sometimes, if let's say you already know some of the small things, so it's like kind of focusing on those things first, and then like combining them, it's like, oh, that's why I did all of those things. It's like, okay, finally giving me the bigger picture. So it does make sense also, like I can see both of them, and I think I've applied both of them in my teaching as well, just because it's like, often it might be easier to start from one thing where like, let's say all the small things are already known. I can kind of build on that to get the big thing. Whilst often, if it's the opposite, then I start from the big idea to like start developing some smaller things. To like, oh, okay, we can get to that from there.
Right. Yeah. Well, I've seen that also in your AI classes. That sometimes it's good to have a mix of things because everybody learns differently. And maybe when you first start the first day of class, you don't want to be like, okay, let's dive into line number 143. You start off and you say, okay, what is AI? This is sort of how we define it. This is the principle of it, and these are some things that we might use as tools. And then over time, you're like, now we're going to dive deep because we have some use case, some application. This is a way that it makes sense to actually use this particular process.
100%.
So cool.
Yeah.
All right, let's switch to fun for a second. I'm curious about you. I've been wondering, like, okay, I know Nadim is a teacher. I know I see him come in. This is a serious guy comes in and teaches. Well, you have fun too, but in the classroom. But I'm wondering, what do you do in the Bay Area on a weekend or in your free time? And you're like, you know what? It's a long week. Let me go and relax or take a load off. What's your go-to, whether that's a restaurant or an activity or some place that you like to go to?
I would say it's a combination of different things. So like, activities I do like kind of like I like going for runs sometimes. It's like kind of really relaxing to me. It's like enjoying some music and like just going for a run like and enjoying the views sometimes. And I live in San Francisco, so sometimes I go running on the Embarcadero, so it's like just nice to see the bay.
Very nice.
Yeah, I like climbing as well. And I love climbing, it's like very supportive community. It's like a lot of people like it's like very like I would say encouraging to like people who are like new to climbing. Everyone's like very supportive, encouraging about actually how to climb, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So that's always often pretty fun. And it's like often let's say you're starting some kind of route that you want to finish, you're not able to finish it. It's like, oh, okay, I can do it this next time. Like I have a new project for me to do actually work on. So and I often do it with friends. So it's like also kind of like more like okay, like you're doing it with friends, you're talking, you're having fun, and also kind of doing the climbing as well. I do like going to restaurants. I love food. I would say in general.
Is there a spot in particular that if we're in San Francisco, someone watching this could say, that's the place to try, you know,
I guess
such and such.
I guess it depends on what kind of food you're craving. Japantown has a lot of really good things, and
Okay.
I love Japanese cuisine.
Yeah.
I would say that's one of my favorites.
Okay.
I do like it's like burgers. It's like there's a burger place called the Butcher Shop, which is also pretty good. Yeah, and like yeah, it's kind of it really depends on what you're craving. Yeah, so yeah, restaurants is something else. I've been playing more tennis with my brother recently,
Oh, very nice.
which has been pretty fun. Like trying to get better at it, etc. Kind of like yeah, master technique a bit more and stuff. Yeah, so it's kind of just trying to keep active, I would say. And then during the winter, I sometimes go skiing in Tahoe because I grew up skiing and like I always enjoy that.
Very nice.
Yeah. What kind of activities do you like?
Yeah, that's it. Throwing the boomerang right back at me. Yeah, I really like swimming. I always liked swimming when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And recently I moved into a place that has a pool. So it's really kind of a nice opportunity for me to just go down there. I love to go at the times when there's nobody there. You know, I don't want to share the pool, right? I'm a little selfish. And so I go down at like sometimes 8:30 in the morning. Like, oh yes, fresh, crisp air. Just dive right in. And then sometimes I go sort of late at night. I like pool closes at 10, so like 9:30. And I'm like, oh, this is so nice, super relaxing. Plus, we got a couple palm trees you look up at and skyscrapers. So sort of doing backstroke, looking up at the stars and stuff. It's a nice experience. And then there's also some gym classes, like fitness classes in my building. So two that I've been really enjoying recently are the HIIT class. So it's a high intensity interval training where you do like 45 seconds of insane exercise where your heart gets pumping, and then you got 30 seconds rest, and then you go right back into it.
Okay.
So that sort of stuff is it really gets me pumped, and sort of like you're talking about as well. I think that having that sort of objective and saying, hey, last time I was able to do, you know, whatever, 20 pounds, you know, in the bicep curl, now I'm going to switch it up and try to do 30 pounds or something. That's sort of like moving up and thinking I couldn't do it today, but maybe next time I'll be able to get all those push-ups in.
Yeah.
It's kind of nice, and it also affects other parts where you're maybe struggling in class, or you're like, I'm not sure if I'm able to do this.
Yeah.
You just push yourself, and that coach is sometimes with you there. It's really nice to have a coach or somebody if you're in a fitness class with other people and there's a coach guiding you. It can be really, or just a friend that, you know, is with you and is telling you can do this, because, you know, that type of attitude is useful in many areas of life. But the last thing that I really do is there's a yoga class as well in my building, so that's been really an eye-opening thing. I used to think like, yoga is just, you know, a bunch of people in expensive pants, you know, stretching, and I actually tried it, and it's really good for the mind, body, and soul at the same time.
100%. You feel a lot of control over the body, kind of like doing some of the moves.
And it's a little bit of exercise as well. Like some of the holds, some of the poses that you hold, like gets your heart racing. So it's like really good for that. And I really have an amazing yoga teacher, if she ever is watching this. I don't know if she would watch some CS podcast, but yeah, I think that I'm really grateful to have the community that I have with those exercise and wellness classes. I think, you know, it's not something to overlook either, because I know some friends that are very, very into like, okay, I've got my LeetCode schedule, I've got to do this many problems this week, I've got to learn this stuff, I have these topics I want to practice. I'm like, that's good. No one's going to tell you like, oh, you know, whatever, don't do LeetCode or something. That no one's going to say that. But I think it's also important to have a balance in life. And it actually helps you be better at the things that you really want to succeed at. If you have a little bit of time where your brain gets rest or your body gets invigorated. And I just can't stress enough that those are things that are important to incorporate. And
100%.
Same goes for sitting in your favorite restaurant and enjoying your delicious juicy burger or whatever type of food that you like. That is time for you, and you know, that's really indispensable, I think, to long-term success, especially when you start working at a company and you sort of have your daily grind and your stress from that. To have your Saturday night that you just go out with your friends and you have a nice time. I mean,
100%.
those parts are almost, well, I'd say just as important as the times that you're diving deep into whatever topic that you're working on.
They're very needed. I feel like otherwise you're gonna get burnt out, and it's like you're not gonna be able to do any more work. And for me, often it's funny when I would go on runs. That's when sometimes I will be able to fix some problems. Like I remember like doing my research, but I'm like, wait, I didn't try this. Like while I'll be going on a run, and it's like I finished, and it's like that worked out of nowhere. Like just kind of sometimes like okay, like taking a break from something, or like often like you really need the break. Otherwise, it's like if you're constantly doing work, it's like your body's just gonna get exhausted after a while. And it's like you need the break. Do something that you like as well for you to be happy as well.
Yeah. And like you said also, I mean, I think the idea of when you're resting, you're actually working too. Your brain probably gets more done when it takes a break. It's kind of like a rubber band, you stretch it out. And then, it comes back to its original form. It's actually stronger than it was before. So I think that type of thing is really true when you give yourself that break. You solve the problem. Sometimes when you just get yourself a nice night of sleep too, you wake up and you're like, I gotta write it down.
That actually happened to me once. I was so happy. I had a dream, which actually helped me fix something in research, and I was like, wait, what? Okay, that's actually great. I love this.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Well.
Yeah, I remember being like, I wish I had like more of those dreams.
Right. How do I get these dreams? Gotta see a fortune teller, right? So that's cool. Yeah, I think so we've talked about work, we've talked about rest. I think what advice would you have for students that are first starting in Align? I mean, you've seen it yourself, so I think you're really in a good position to tell people. If you were to give them maybe your top advice for, I'm new, I haven't done computer science, or I've done it a little bit or something, I come from some other field. I'm joining Align, I'm joining this campus or another, even Northeastern campus. What advice do you have for someone just first starting out that you'd say, and maybe it's something that you wish you heard yourself when you were studying, or maybe it's just, people always say such and such, and I think that there's another way of looking at it. What's the advice that you would give to some newcomer?
So for me, I'm actually I've been teaching for the last couple of semesters CS 5001, so it's literally the first class that people take when they actually join the Align program. One advice I would say, it's honestly don't be hard on yourself in a lot of ways. So often people come in, it's like, oh, everyone else around me knows much more than I do. I'm gonna be the only one who's struggling. And especially with the Align program, a lot of people are new to the field, and so they're gonna be like, oh, everyone knows more CS than I do. I'm like, I don't know any CS. And something that I want to I also wish I had that advice when I was starting grad school. It's a lot of us are in the same kind of situation. A lot of people are new to CS, and that's fine. That's great. That's why all of us are here. You're all here to learn. And no matter where you start, that's completely fine. And for me, just I always kind of insist on this idea, and the idea of imposter syndrome is because it can feel lonely when it's you always feel like I'm the only one who's struggling, everyone else is doing much better than I am. So something I always try to keep, I would often recommend, it's open about that, especially with your classmates and stuff. I know it can be scary. It was really scary for me when the first time it happened, but you just kind of start noticing that a lot of people are going through the same thing. I was doing this assignment. I was also struggling. Really? I thought you weren't struggling. I thought I was the only one who was struggling. And you start noticing it's a lot of people are actually opening up, and all of us are actually having very similar experiences. And so that's something I always kind of, it's it can feel lonely. Try to reach out for support. We're here for you. And know that you're not the only one who's struggling. A lot of us are struggling, and that's fine. Sometimes it's with learning, it's something new. You might feel uncomfortable. It's I didn't know this concept. I'm learning something new. It might take some time for me to actually understand it. That's fine. That's part of learning. It's as long as as you're not really uncomfortable, it's a bit of discomfort. It's okay, but you're doing some learning, and it's gonna be better and better with time. And know that you're not by yourself in this. That's something honestly I wish someone had told me when I first started grad school. And I often try to do it as I finished grad school pretty recently, so it's I can often understand what other people are going through it because I went through it pretty recently. And so that's, I would say, something I would recommend. And we're literally here for, it's when I'm teaching 5001, it's I often emphasize that we're literally here for you. I want to be here to support you. don't feel bad about any question you might have. Like often people are like, oh, what if I have a stupid question? I'm like, you're getting it answered, you're understanding the material more. Ask it, go for it. And really often, and I think you've noticed that with my classes, when someone asks a question, a lot of people have the same question, might have the same question.
Absolutely.
So you're helping yourself and you're helping others.
Mm.
So yeah, like always be kind of like, I feel like as long as someone is really willing to learn, they're gonna do amazing. And we'll be there to support them along the way. Which is what I love honestly about the line program. Because a lot of people want to get to the CS, and honestly that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to join Northeastern, is because I love the idea of a line program. It's like people not in CS, not in data science, who really want to join the field. We're doing something different, and want to get in, kind of want to start, like want to start a new career essentially, or like combine what they had done before with something new as well. And I love this idea of welcoming other people to the field, and it's like supporting them, helping them to accomplish whatever they want.
Yeah, that's inspirational because I guess it's almost just as interesting or maybe more interesting of a story to tell when someone does this total pivot.
Oh yeah.
You know, the traditional path is obviously a good way to go as well, but when somebody has this really interesting story to tell and hey, I came from another field, that would be the perfect student to say, hey, you've got beginner's mind, let's see what type of things that you think of when you're doing CS.
Yeah, and it's often great because a lot of people are coming from very different backgrounds, you're also learning a lot from each other. I'm often learning a lot from my students. Like I have students coming from medicine, from like finance, accounting, languages. So it's like very different fields, and it's like always very interesting learning about your experiences before, like what have you done before. And so personally, I'm also learning a lot from the students, which makes it really exciting.
Yeah, that's great. I read a book a while back, actually, before I came to Northeastern, called Graduate Admission Essays, Write Your Way into the Grad School of Your Choice. And it talks a lot about this same concept of what's a good reason to do grad school? Well, there's a bad reason, which is, you know, I just don't want to deal with the job market, or I just don't really, you know, want to, whatever, something along the lines of I'm avoiding something and I'm not trying to do something new, right? And, you know, of course you can be nervous about the job market, but say, hey, I have an idea of maybe something that I want to do next. And it's a little healthier than just, you know, choose something at random and, you know, I don't really want to deal with this. At least that's what the book says. Yeah. But what it said also is that a good reason to do grad school, probably one of the top reasons, is that you have some inkling of an idea of, I want to combine some things that I could not combine otherwise. You know, like when I was an undergrad, I could do CS or I could do anything. You know, I could study anthropology, right? But when you do grad school, you have an opportunity to combine disciplines that you would never have had otherwise.
That's very true.
So the idea is, the example that they give in the book is, maybe you studied art history in undergrad and you love art history, but you don't necessarily know if you enjoy doing some path leading to museum curation or something. It's not really for you. But what you did learn is that there's techniques for restoring artworks.
Yeah.
So what you do is, in grad school, you do a chemistry program. And you're like, someone would look at you from the outside and maybe some people might say, that's a bit of an odd choice. Art history, chemistry, those have nothing to do with one another. But in the end, that person might end up being a very highly specialized art restoration expert, because you need to know a lot about chemistry and you need to know a lot about art in order to do that properly. Yeah. So in the end, these sort of things that don't make a lot of sense at the beginning of, you know, oh, why do marketing in CS? Why do medicine in CS? In the end, that actually might combine to be a very powerful sort of niche that nobody would have expected before, let alone the person who actually made that decision, right?
100%.
But you follow your heart a little bit and you say, even if it's just a little tiny part of you that says, you know, CS seems kind of cool. Maybe I'll give it a shot, right?
It's like there's always a lot of intersection between different fields that sometimes might be hard to see when you're kind of first starting to get into a field. But it's like, I agree, it's like absolutely fascinating. Like another example, it's like archaeology. Let's say you have some kind of species and you want to find out where, like, it's like when did it actually live, like when it was actually like alive, etc. And it's like you can come up with a machine learning model if you have many of the species, kind of get some estimate, essentially kind of like predict when the species were alive or etc. Or like what kind of species does it look like. You can really do a lot of things with like CS techniques, and that's something that I love, even with like CS or even data science as well, because we also have data science at Northeastern here. And it's like there's data like in literally every single aspect of our lives. whatever you're doing, there's data about it.
Yeah.
Like I remember simple example. If you want to buy a house, there's data about house prices. If you want to do anything like kind of let's say like regular life, politics, anything, elections, there's data about it, kind of like predictions, like what's gonna happen later. So data is just always in all of our lives. And for me, it's always important to I feel like learn like, oh, okay, can I infer some information from this data? What story is it telling me?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and you really need to be able to kind of do some science with this data, which is what you also learn quite a bit in CS and in data science as well.
Yeah.
And like you can combine it with a lot of different fields, like kind of a lot of like social sciences, for me it's like really fascinating.
Virtually anything really. It
Oh,
doesn't
yeah.
have to be
Oh, yeah.
any limit to
Oh,
it's
100%.
related to science, it's related to, things that are least related to data might be the most affected by data, right? Like
100%.
literature, ancient literature,
Oh,
finding
yeah.
patterns and
Oh yeah,
poetry or something
Yeah.
like that. I mean,
100%.
could be.
Like with NLP, it's like combining languages and CS.
Yeah.
Or like traffic modeling. Who would have thought I could see a car on my computer? Like kind of like I was kind of simulating or something.
Yeah.
Like a couple of years ago. So it's always super cool, kind of combining everything together.
Yeah, and I guess I would just close that part of the conversation by saying that what you think is sort of, the advice that I would give as well is what you think is quote unquote almost a weakness in your mind is actually your greatest strength.
Yeah.
Because the fact that you know something about medicine, even if you didn't go through the whole medical school and you have some knowledge and you think, whatever, it's not going to help me here. The thing that you think is your greatest weakness might very well be, and probably is, your greatest strength. In the same vein as imposter syndrome, whatever you think is a weakness is usually a strength. Whatever you think is a, bad thing is actually positive because it's room for growth.
Yeah.
So try to question every once in a while the negative ideas that you have either about yourself or your path or anything. Is good advice, and I think you've touched on that as well yourself. And with the imposter syndrome, is that there's probably somebody else who has the same worries. So the more you talk to people around you and introduce yourself as well, the more you'll say, hey, there's another person who's also from another field, and we might be both worried, but we're worried together, and maybe discussing things together is going to help us move towards a little bit more confidence in our skills and our abilities, and help us on our journey.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and like, because I'm remembering like with like imposter syndrome, like your discussions with, because I saw the podcast with like Aaron and with BJ as well, and I remember you talking about some concepts that at first were really hard for you to understand. Like I remember, I think one of them mentioned recursion or something.
Yeah, recursion.
And recursion is often really hard for a lot of people. But often someone might think it's like, oh, am I the only one who's struggling with recursion? Like, no, almost everyone's struggling with recursion when they first learn it. It's maybe like a bit of a tricky concept at first, etc. And with this discussion, for example, that happened between you, I think it was Aaron.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, okay, wait, like maybe people could also see it's like, okay, so in case I struggle with recursion, other people are struggling with recursion, and everyone's going through something, everyone's going through challenges, but you master it now, you learned it now, you understand it now. So which is amazing.
Definitely. So I'm a little curious too, because we've talked a little tiny bit. I came and saw you in office hours about like my path and research and things that I might want to do in the future. But I'm really curious about you, because you did a bit of research. Would you have a short elevator pitch about the things you worked on before to share with us today? Because I think a lot of students might be curious about the stuff that you did before you came to Northeastern as well. Seems like you've done a lot.
Yeah, so the PhD, so I did different, I would say, kind of research. Like my PhD kind of work was mainly on traffic modeling, and essentially my goal was to come up with essentially a model for traffic that can essentially be able to estimate where cars are gonna be anytime on the road at any time essentially. And like it was very fun kind of working on it because I got to also incorporate a bit of driver behaviors into it. And so often when I would be driving on the road, I'm like, oh, okay, why are cars behaving that way? And it's like kind of also, I would say, incorporating a bit of psychology of driving, which was really cool. Like I would have the aggressive drivers, the more like risk averse drivers, and putting all of them on the road and just seeing essentially how sometimes having one very risky driver could really impact the whole traffic situation and lead to traffic jams.
Okay,
Yeah. And so it was cool kind of playing with that aspect, kind of using computational tools to be able to like see that essentially. And that's what I did for a lot of my PhD. Kind of, I started with the one lane kind of model, just a one lane road, having cars kind of go on, like kind of drive on it, and like essentially like seeing how people are gonna accelerate, decelerate, what actually impacts that. moving to a multi-lane model, so that kind of, okay, many lanes, people can go through another lane, exchange lanes. Some people might really like to exchange lanes, some people might like to stay in a lane the whole time. And then also adding some carpool lanes, kind of like toll lanes, and just seeing also how that could also impact the traffic situation. And you could always do more and more and more. So in the, like, I'm still gonna be doing a bit of work on it. In the fall, I'm gonna be adding some curvature to the model. Like, it's like I'm gonna be working with one of the students, Julia, you've met her.
Yeah.
Julia, yeah.
Okay.
So she's gonna be working essentially with me, like, on adding curvature to the model, which is also gonna be cool, kind of, because you could also like model more and more like roads, up until we kind of add more and more complexity to get to something that is actually like more of a real, like something that actually exists in life, and we can actually model it and see what will happen.
Yeah.
So that's what I did with my PhD thesis. I also did some work in industry, so during my internships, like that was essentially like, so that was more machine learning oriented, I would say. And the idea, I was combining, essentially like the fields were combining machine learning and something, I think I've mentioned that before, like in front of you, it's like in scientific computing and like in applied math, which is called partial differential equations.
Mm-hmm.
These are just essentially equations that model often some physical kind of, let's say the behavior of some physical kind of, what's the word that I'm looking for? Yeah, kind of like some physical component, whether it's like cars, whether it's like fluids, many different things essentially. And those equations, for example, they can model traffic modeling. That's, I also use those in my thesis. But the idea is that with those equations, like sometimes there's many ways of solving them, and you can actually use machine learning to solve them. And we were just coming up with ways to like solve them more properly, essentially.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's like I work on different things. I kind of, because I was interested in machine learning, I also wanted to see how, let's like kind of like, I want I guess like learn more about it, understand more about it, kind of its power, its capability. And I enjoyed honestly kind of the different research, like the different research tracks that I worked on.
Yeah, very cool. It's sort of, I mean, hearing you talk about it now, I'm fascinated, right? I mean, that's awesome to hear the varied and the sort of real world problems and modeling that you focused on, which are very relatable to our actual physical world, which is kind of cool because sometimes things can get very abstract, you know, in different fields. So when you sort of at least have some idea of, hey, this is what it corresponds to, and I'm sure when you drive on the road and you're thinking about this all the time.
Yeah, and I feel like especially after traffic modeling, I still think about it the whole time. I'm like, okay, this is happening, just like this is happening. I'm like, oh, maybe I should incorporate this into my model. Wait, what should I do now? Yeah, and I'm always thinking about like kind of like driving gears, anything like when I'm driving, which is funny.
For sure. And I guess what strikes me hearing you talk and having a little bit of the knowledge that I have now about CS is that the more modern approach is sort of thinking from, you know, starting from machine learning in a way, right? Because it used to be that we really, and it's still, obviously we're not saying that algorithms are not important or as important, but algorithms are just as important. But previously we think a lot about these like finite state automata and think about a certain model of computation that was very sort of, you know, just sort of the typical type of binary and things like it. It was a certain model of computation, and it's very important still. I mean, you need to know that stuff for much of what CS is today. But it's just interesting to hear you say now that you sort of were in the machine learning almost from an early point on. And people that I know who entered sort of around the time I was in undergrad, they started with algorithms and then they moved into like ML. And it seems like you're sort of like, I mean, you were in math as well, so you were in some related-ish fields, but your path has sort of been like direct to machine learning, which is just interesting because, I don't know, it struck me in a way because I used to think that the path was like starting in CS and then moving on to machine learning later once you have this idea of like an algorithm and the complexity, and then you're like, well, machine learning can help us approximate it, or AI can help us approximate things more quickly, right? And so that was sort of the path that I used to hear some of my friends who did CS talking about. Yours is more from the modeling to sort of, I mean, directly into that machine learning side of things, which is
so I had done all the foundations in CS
I
before.
see.
Yeah, so it's like programming, kind of discrete structures, all of these kind of algorithms. I had already done them before starting to do ML.
Okay.
I would say maybe my research was not really in these kind of fields, but I already had those kind of like foundations already done.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Well.
Yeah.
But take back what I said.
But with ML, it also has a lot of, I would say, intersections with like other fields like numerical analysis, which is a field in applied math.
Okay.
And like with scientific computing also, because like for example, like with like one of the simplest models in machine learning is linear regression. I think we've seen that together
Talk
as well.
about it a bit, yeah.
100%. So that can be done from a linear regression perspective. It could also be done from like the perspective of fitting polynomials, kind of fitting functions, which is often also done in numerical analysis. So there were already some intersections I was seeing in both fields.
Gotcha.
And that's why I kind of want to explore the a bit further.
So I guess what I meant to say, or now that I rephrase my statement, is you have more of a numerical entry point into that than some of the people that I know are very much in the sort of algorithmic, like how do we optimize and make it like the actual process of like training faster. So the people that I met that were like made the transition from like CS into ML. Not that you're not in optimization as well, but just seems that your numbers work has sort of afforded you that type of entry point. At least interest.
I would say in terms of interest, I think maybe that's how it happened. I'm not sure with machine learning models, you also have to optimize in different ways, whether it's going to be the training, like it's like different factors, I would say. But I think maybe the way my interest grew from machine learning was from more, like it's like came from the applied math part. Because machine learning can also be seen a bit as applied math. In a lot of different ways.
I mean, even in different classes that I've been doing, I've seen this sort of almost, you can see some issues in fields such as NLP from the graph standpoint, of like traversing the graph, but you can also see it from like a linear algebra standpoint, where you can maybe go faster by using certain types of operations that will speed up the whole process, and then you go through that sparse graph much faster. So
100%.
it just I tend to see things almost through two lenses there in a way, and I like to sort of dive into one and then dive into the other. And the math one sometimes scares me, but with you, I've felt that I made a lot of progress on that.
I'm glad, No, because for me, it's like, remember, like one of the like I'd say like some of the, like one of the concepts that I learned in machine learning that was like super fascinating to me was like PCA, principal component analysis. And I really enjoyed it because I was like just seeing the equivalent in linear algebra. So it's like a singular value decomposition. And it's like you can think of PCA exactly as singular value decomposition, but then you could also use that, like the singular value decomposition can be like, I'd say more computationally, like let's say less prone to numerical instabilities. So, but they really do the exact same things, and it was kind of interesting seeing in different fields how like a lot of things are just almost identical in terms of concepts.
Right.
And I understand math can be scary. Can completely understand. I definitely had those experiences as well, where like math definitely scared me as well. But it can also be really fun, and it's like really logical in some ways. It's like where sometimes it's like, oh, that makes sense why I'm doing this. It's like, oh, I can see why this is actually mirroring or modeling what's happening in applications or in machine learning or something like that. And I feel like with math, it's like as long as I'm taking it step by step, building everything, it's like, okay, wait, it's nice, it's pretty fun. Which is why I enjoy also teach math classes, because I know a lot of people tend to be scared of them. And I'm like, something that I feel like it's like I'm passionate about working on is like trying to be like, okay, wait, math doesn't have to be that scary. It can be also fun. We can all learn it, and it's like kind of like, okay, it can actually make sense for all of us.
Well, I definitely felt that in your classes, that you were taking things step by step so that everybody could really understand it. So that's something that we all appreciate. I think I speak for all of the Northeastern students who've been in your classes, that you take the time to explain things. Great. So my next question was actually if you're going to potentially, since you were a researcher before and you must have enjoyed a lot of what you did as a PhD student, and even in some of the professional opportunities you had, if you're going to continue with that research or with other research, if you had other pokers in the fire, other projects that you're sort of on the back burner for the moment. I was curious if, and you sort of answered a little bit because you mentioned you'd be working with another student in the fall. I was wondering what the sort of future prospects for that were, if that's something that is still in the pipeline for you in terms of continuing things from the past, because I know that you love teaching now. It's been clear that you've had a good time doing that, but there's research side of things, and I know that Corey also is actually Corey College, the College of Computer Science at Northeastern, is also very interested in research and the research that faculty are doing, and there's a bit of that going on at the Silicon Valley campus. But I was wondering if you plan on continuing or starting up new things, or taking that in new directions, if that's something that's in the cards for you in the future.
I think I do want to include a bit of more research in the coming years. So I'm going to be doing a bit of that in the fall. I'm also thinking about it a bit in the spring as well. So far it's like I've been continuing a bit the traffic modeling kind of work that I had done before. I feel like, because for me it's like I see research and teaching complementing each other quite a bit. It's like with teaching you always have to update the courses, what people are actually learning, to like also mimic what's actually happening in real life. Otherwise it's like I'm gonna always be teaching the old concept. It's like I also want to be kind of like more like essentially updated with what's actually happening with research out there, like AI, anything. It's like I could keep on teaching AI in a very old style, but I could also like, oh, I need to incorporate some of the things that are actually happening right now.
Yeah.
So that's why I feel like research is important for teaching. And at the same time, I feel like with research, whenever you're gonna be giving presentations, or like if someone wants to continue the work after you, teaching is also really important here, because you want to be able to explain what your research is actually doing, why you did this, like what can be done after, what are some things that you can still work on. And I feel like teaching is the main component, like also like that you would need here to like continue kind of, I would say, expanding the research. So that's why I see them both really kind of working together. And I would say like I'm gonna be doing a bit more research like kind of in the coming years. Like I'm gonna be like starting essentially this coming year. Yeah, and in terms of like projects, so like I have the traffic modeling. I also have some kind of ideas in terms of more like educational projects, because like essentially kind of evaluating, for example, because something that I'm really also interested in is the idea of mastery learning. So that's like you can apply this in classes often. The idea of mastery learning is essentially, or like also known as competency learning, is the idea of like, it's not you have like, okay, one assignment or one exam, you do really well at it and it's gone. Because learning is a process. It's like, it could be that maybe this like concept, I haven't really mastered it really well yet, but I will master it later. And like, I don't want to just judge the understanding of the student at this time, essentially with this kind of assessment. So it's like more of like the idea of like, you can keep on doing the assessments, you can keep on learning more and more, because the learning, it's not like you have to learn everything by week 3. It's fine if you learn it by week 10 or week 9. What matters to me is that the actual learning is done. Yeah, and so this idea of kind of like seeing also the effect of mastery learning on students, whether they like kind of like how it impacts them, maybe in terms of imposter syndrome and different aspects.
Sure, yeah. And I guess the learning is continuous as well in the sense of your whole life, because when you start in a company or something, you have to repeat the learning process as well.
100%.
Learning slightly different things in a different environment, but you still have to think, okay, how does learning take place, and how do I handle things like imposter syndrome as well? So there's that's something that's continuous as well, right? The learning doesn't usually stop completely when you leave school. It keeps going, and there's constantly reinventing yourself and upskilling and experimenting with new things.
100%. And I feel like learning how to learn is one of the most important skills to have, because it's like, as long as like you're always fine, like, okay, I want to learn something new, even if it's something new, I'm gonna put the effort, I'm gonna put the time in, even if it takes me time. I think that's, if like whenever someone has that, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And anyone can achieve it as well.
For sure, and having fun doing it, and also having the appropriate level of challenge in there that will push you to, climb up to the next level on the climbing wall. I'm sure you've been doing in your in your time, or reaching a new objective there.
100%. It's like this next move might be hard the first time, second time. With time, I will be able to do it essentially. Same thing with the learning.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess the last thing that I'd like to ask you is maybe, I guess, would you consider yourself, I mean, now you've been here for a while, you've been in the US for a very long time, but you come from another country originally, right? You come from Lebanon. Do you have do you have advice for some of the international students who may be coming from another country, having maybe cultural differences and things that they're adapting to? And they might have been here for a while, but sort of navigating that side of things as well is something that I hear oftentimes around me. There may be specific challenges associated with that, and different things, techniques that people use to continue moving forward. Something that I was curious about, and I'm a citizen, so I haven't had the specific challenges of that. But I don't know, maybe you don't consider yourself an international student anymore either, because you sort of established yourself here.
Yeah, so I definitely do consider myself international. Like, it's like, I was born in the US, so technically I am a citizen.
Okay,
but
gotcha.
Culturally I grew up in Lebanon, so I would consider myself like really Lebanese.
Yeah.
Like over American, but like, it's like, I would say embrace your differences. Everyone is different, everyone has different experiences, and that's amazing. Because like a lot of my friends that I met in the US, I feel like I learned a lot from their cultures, from their experiences, which was amazing to learn about. And they learned also a lot from my experiences, my essentially my culture. And I feel like like that's something I'm also like really enjoying, kind of like with being at Northeastern, because there's a lot of internationals, and kind of learning from like the students' cultures, where they come from, like it's like what they think about different things, how they might act about different things. It's always really great, and I feel like that creates a lot of kind of inclusivity for everyone. It's like kind of understanding more cultures, being more understanding, being more accepting of others. So yeah. So I feel like it's like, I know it can be sometimes scary. Like sometimes the language could be also like a factor. It's like, oh, okay, that's not the language that I'm comfortable with. But often people are gonna be appreciative if you're actually putting the effort to like talk in a language that maybe you're not comfortable in, and like because you're doing some exchange of cultures, and and it's like I feel like it's like having more international it's like having international students, having people from different places is amazing in terms of diversity. Like actually having people kind of like relate to one another, also like learn things from different cultures. Like one of my good friends is from the Dominican Republic, and I've noticed how much the cultures in Lebanon and Dominican Republic are very similar, and I'm like,
Okay. Oh, really?
yeah.
I would not have guessed.
Me neither. It's like very different places. It's like the
Geographically,
continents,
yeah,
it's like very
yeah,
far.
yeah.
I'm like, wait, how? It's like, okay, how did that happen? It's like you start seeing a lot of similarities with different people with different cultures that you wouldn't have maybe like actually actually have expected, would have actually found out if I wasn't like in a place like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so, like with Northeastern, it's like it's like there's definitely like quite a bit of diversity in terms of the students, and something that I also love, because so like during my PhD I did quite a bit of work with like essentially like an organization that's known as Women in Data Science, and it's like essentially a conference that like it's like an organization that for like their goal essentially is to empower women in the field of data science, because often there's not a lot of women in data. It's like in data science essentially.
Yeah.
Something that I love about Northeastern, like the work that's being done, is like there's definitely quite a bit of work on diversity, because almost 50% of the students are actually women, like identify as women, which is for me, I was like really amazed to see. Because I was like, okay, wow, there's actually some, it's like you can actually see some diversity, because like that was something that I was really working, like it's like I was really like passionate about working on, for example, like, and that's why I joined Women in Data Science, kind of the empowerment of people who might be like minoritized in a lot of different fields, and it was really great for me to see that that was actually like being worked on at Northeastern. Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, so to summarize, I guess some of that embracing the diversity and embracing, I think food is a good uniting force as well. I have a lot of Chinese friends here, and they've taken me to some amazing restaurants. So one thing that we could always agree on, we might always not always have the same cultural lens, but one thing that we always agree on is, oh wow, this spicy Szechuan food is really good. If you like the spicy food. So
I got some recommendation from my students. I remember it was like okay, perfect. Yeah. It's like,
yeah. So that's a really good uniting force, is some common some food that you're taking the leap of faith and trying some other culture's food, or also the activities that we all enjoy. Like you've chosen climbing. I've heard some other people as well, rock climbing, and having a common activity that regardless of your culture, you can enjoy this together. And that's kind of a cool thing that we have. Whether that's diversity for gender, for nationality, or any other thing in terms of mindset or religion or anything that you can think of. That's definitely a strength that we have here, and even in the Silicon Valley as well. We have many people who come from different places and have different perspectives. So it's definitely a strength to have that, and to be able to navigate that diversity and respect it.
Yeah. Even diverse in terms of backgrounds, like academic backgrounds.
Yeah, also
very cool.
Definitely. Okay, well, I think that wraps up our conversation. Thank you so much for meeting with me today. I was really happy to have your perspective and to hear a little bit more about you, because sometimes we don't have that. I think people tend to be in this like ivory tower mentality of like, oh, my professor is this way, and maybe he's or she is totally up there, and I don't. I'm not allowed to ask questions about who they are, but I'm glad I was able to learn a little bit more about you, and I think students will probably see that you're another human being who also stayed up late and procrastinated and things like that.
That happens quite much. 100%.
So I hope that that's another thing that might have happened from this podcast, is that people will see that as well, and I think they'll be happy to see that in that way as well. They're not alone. So thanks for
thank you for having me. That was really fun. I really enjoyed the conversation.
I'm glad. Yeah.